Good morning. Looking back over my experience of Western culture and trying to come to terms with what that is, I have discovered that it really seems to operate on a very, very different principle from what is natural or native to me. And it it really has a implicit paradigm that can act as a very confusing, very obstructive, very distorting mechanism if you don't happen to be somebody that automatically thinks in those terms and embraces that paradigm. Now, the paradigm is identity, and the notion that identity is your fundamental private property, that you need to protect it with every aspect of your power, defend your identity reflexively, be proactive with regard to advancing what your identity is or how you perceive that, and go at it with all your might. This form of logic, which is also an emotional construct because it requires the harnessing of all your emotional power. This logic is quintessentially Western. It's the advanced Western paradigm. And it can, if you don't think in those terms, if you think in other terms, it can really mess with your mind and with your sense of self. Actually, paradoxically, it can mess with your identity, with your underlying sense of your being. I don't want to use that term identity in this context, because identity is in contemporary Western terms, it's a construct, it's a mechanism or an engine for power. So I don't want to say, well, your being is necessarily that same thing as an identity, but it can mess with your sense of being, this paradigm regarding identity. Because if you don't see things in that way, if you don't defend your private property, your sense of public identity and private identity, uh, because they are intermingled, they are linked. If you don't defend those things in a very strenuous way, then it seems like you don't care. You have no concern about anything. You're not doing the right thing. You're careless. You're negligent. You are. A below par individual. You're not thinking correctly. You need to be corrected. You entertain pathological aspects to your thought processes or something. But it can really mess with your sense of being if people levy that kind of accusation, even implicitly, against you. You start to think, what is going on? What's going wrong? I don't see things as you do. And it's very, very obstructive. The blind side of contemporary Western thinking, it's anything that occurs outside of that paradigm of identity as a private property thing. Uh, my worldview is constructed on the basis of honor. I have a very deep sense of honor and a very deep sense of dishonor, and I don't see things in terms of, I'm currently projecting my identity or pushing it forward to some degree or some amount. I see it as I see my situation in the world as having to do with obeying these hidden principles of honor, or defending my sense of honor, a very, very internal thing. I really don't care, to some degree, whether publicly people acknowledge that I'm defending my honor. It's a very private thing, first and foremost, and then maybe they can acknowledge it, or maybe they will never see that. But it's what I have to do. It's what I am. It's who I am. It's my being. So being, in that sense, is very different from identity. So gives a very different logical construct to reality and how one navigates it and navigates within it. So I oftentimes find that there's a subtle insinuation of the identity paradigm and also of the individualism paradigm. I have been getting psychological counseling, which has been very useful to me, just to have a listening ear and somebody who reinforces me as an entity. But there's a subtle sense as well that sometimes comes in of the Western paradigm of identity, and the sense that your identity is individual. It's not, should never be a group identity. Now that's a Western prejudice. I could go into that, but I might leave that for later or whatever. And there's a sense that you just cut, or you can, or you should, or whatever. It's an option to cut your losses and just move on, move away from whatever situation you were in, and just start with a totally different orientation, I suppose, and you just sort of pull along the threads of your identity out of that old situation and tie them all together and put them in the new situation. And to me, that's not logical. I can understand it in theory, but my sense of honor is that you need to resolve those issues, those prior issues of the past, and then you move on to another level or another stage. You don't just drag yourself out of that and cut yourself off into a new space and then sort of magically start off again. So I was saying to Mike yesterday that it seems there must have been reasons why I held on to some aspects of the past that others would not have done. The psychologist was saying to me, there are people who escape cults and they run away and then they cut off and then that's it for them. They start a new, fresh period of their lives. And she was saying, but you don't seem to have done that. And I was saying to Mike, yeah, it is kind of suspicious, isn't it, that I haven't. But then when I think about, I mean, it seems very negative on the surface. Well, why not just cut? Why not just cut and run? Why have these connections to things that may be negative? But because to my mind, well, I don't think in that way, and I'm sorry, I'm being sorry, a little bit of hay fever there. I think there are all sorts of reasons, and within the Western paradigm, I would look like a very silly person, I suspect. You don't just cut. I haven't just cut with something negative, but the labeling of the non-Western culture as necessarily something negative, well, that's a mistake of the Western paradigm. That's a mistake because it wasn't so negative at all, and the collectivist paradigm wasn't so negative at all. It wasn't that it bound up my threads of being and made them hard to access, or it was a wrong developmental direction. That is a view of from the Western paradigm that prioritizes and aggrandizes only itself, doesn't see the potential within a different paradigm, cannot see it because it sees itself as the norm. So one reason why I didn't just cut and run was because actually the collectivist paradigm served me very, very well indeed. It separated me from the potency of my father's aggression and vengeance. It was a different paradigm from the nuclear family paradigm. And there's a collectivist horizontal peer group support paradigm that really made me feel very good and very happy and very connected. So that's one reason why I'm not naturally an individual in that isolated, atomized sense. It's not the way I think about the world. And the psychologist said, well, the collectivist paradigm and the nuclear family paradigm are both negative. And I'm saying, well, in my case, the collective paradigm wasn't negative, and the nuclear family paradigm was very negative for me because I had to be subjected to my father's anger and his rage and his aggression after I lost my peer group support. So it's very, she didn't understand that. So it's really impossible to convey something like that, the positive side of something that is not a Western construct. And then I also thought the reason I didn't cut and run, Mike brought this up. He said that would be like taking the gap, the ultimate dishonor. And it wasn't okay. The expression taking the gap was used to somewhat malign or cast suspicion on those who were leaving the Rhodesian situation and just finding a way to get into another mode of being that wasn't so pressured. Get out of the pressure cooker. You leap out of it. You find a gap and you take it. And it wasn't so negative, but it was a form of saying, well, you can't take the pressure and we can. And I think there's also an element of that in my being. I think, well, why just opt for something that's easier? It can seem on the surface to be easier to do something like just sort of cut and run. Now you're a different person. But, or now, you've pulled the threads of your individualism out of that situation and you tied them all together and now you're there's a new ball of Jennifer or something, nice little knotted cotton ball of being, or I should say ball of identity, because I think the Western construct doesn't view being so much as this constructed identity that you are supposed to do the work for, and it's not like something that is there automatically. That would be your being, but something that you construct actively, which is your identity. So then there would be the identity of Jennifer set in this place and all the threads pulled out and reconstructed anew. But it seems to me to do that. It's like you take all the potential that you have had. I mean, for me, it's the opposite result. So you take all the potential that you have had from the African circumstances and you throw it away and you say, there's nothing rich there. That was collectivists and therefore that was corrupting. There's nothing rich or nothing I can draw from that and bring with me as part of my state of being. I've got to just cut it and start anew as this little ball of Jennifer, furry and complete. So I would feel if I was just to simply cut, not only is it a dishonor in some way, in some moderate way, that you're taking the gap, but also, and maybe much more to the point, it's losing the potential. It's losing the richness. It's losing the African character and the experience and the deep sensuality and deep spirituality of that. And it's just saying, well, I'm just going to be Western now. How about that? Yes. And it's so empty, so potentially, so likely to be much more arid and much more devoid of any emotional imbuement or spiritual feeling or sensation, because you're just cutting from what you had before, and now it's just whatever is allowable in the contemporary West, which I have actually found to be really rather limited, rather stiff and sterile. And to be honest, I haven't managed to sustain myself spiritually or emotionally by trying to be Western. So that's another reason. A third reason is I have too much spirit, I think, in the Nietzschean sense. I feel too enlivened and too vitalized within myself to give up on a manner of well, my let's say on to give up on my African self, to give up on a manner of handling with the world and dealing with the world because it has some negative components. I'm not so driven toward a artificial purity. It would be sterile for me. I can embrace life with negative components. I think the negativity is really all part of the whole mix, and I'm too spirited to say no. I just got to have something that's really pure, just Jennifer, just me, uncontaminated by any negative thing, and a negative Rhodesian identity or a negative background experience. Can't have that anymore. That would be the person who can say that or would say that would be a very skeletal Jennifer, a really limited kind of personality that just wants to get rid of something because it's difficult and it's complex and it's got these elements of pain within it. Now you work with the pain. So that's my philosophy of being, which is very different from the Western construct of identity. So all the way along, I function on the basis of honor in relation to my being. It's honorable to keep that continuity with my African past, even if it's painful. It's honorable to maintain my sense of continuity, even if other people find that a problem for them, because they think, oh, Rhodesia, oh, it's so evil, it's just terrible, and it would be expedient for me to cut and run from that identity, but I don't. It would be dishonorable, I think, to succumb to social or political blackmail in that sense. But this is nothing that the Western paradigm is able to observe or to see in me. I can't by any means get that across because they have a different paradigm. They have the paradigm of identity as your private property that you construct, that you take care of, that you defend with all your might. And it's a constructed identity. And they don't see it, that there's a historical deeper, emotional, visceral spirituality that could be lost on the basis of this very limited identity paradigm. I do find, on a connected note, I do find that when people ask me questions about identity, it's it's a real mechanism of obstructing my thought. It really interferes with my sense of being because the questions are either empty or misleading. For example, somebody could say to me, well, maybe you never found your group. And I'm thinking, what does it even mean? I could answer that either negatively or positively, but it would be very arbitrary because it's not to do with honor and it's not to do with my being. Therefore, it's an arbitrary question that could lead people to make false judgments about me if I answer either way. But then it's, if you don't answer the question, then it seems like you're evading the question. So you must answer it. You say, yes, I never found my group, or something. No, I did find my group. Sorry, that's, yes, I found my group, and no, I didn't find my group. But it has no meaning, not in a deep, deep sense. Because group identity in the contemporary Western culture would be to do with the resonance of your self-constructed private property of identity, and then you find people with a similar self-construct, and then they are your group. But in my case, I have gone into many groups and I've ascertained their degree of honor. I've determined that some groups are more honorable in relation to themselves and others, and some are less honorable. And I have found that intellectuals tend to be more honorable, and I've resonated with that. And I used to find that skydivers had that sense of very close, clannish almost loyalty. I wouldn't say exact loyalty because they are moderners, but almost loyalty in some way through a shared passion. I used to find that, and that struck me as honourable. But very often I fear I'm projecting my own being into a situation which may or may not be what's actually really occurring. So in my whole system of evaluation, are people honourable? Would they back you up on principle just because you are their friend, or would they cut and run and create a new identity and pull the threads of their being out from the relationship and start anew and start afresh because the going was getting difficult for them? What would they do? Are they people of honor or people of manufactured identity? So that's the real essence, that's the crux for me. And so asking me a question about did I find my group, didn't I find my group, it's really nonsensical, but you must answer the question. You must come up with an answer within that narrow constraint of the contemporary Western paradigm. And there it is. It's this kind of emotional blackmail, really. It's a blackmail against your fundamental being, but nonetheless, it's there. It's a construct. However you answer will betray your deeper, your real sense of fundamental being, because it won't be in terms of your own paradigm, it won't be in terms of honor. That's the paradigm that I relate to and embrace. It will have to be in terms of this alien paradigm that concerns itself with identity. And it has so much a foreign system of logic, it's just really bizarre to me, it's very alien to me. And there are all sorts of moral implications with it as well, that if you don't pull the threads of your identity out of a situation and reconstruct this little cotton ball with all the threads and making it into some narrow wholeness that's very separated from the context that you came from. If you don't do that, then somehow you're being pathological. You're allowing part of yourself to waft off, and you're not defending it, and you're allowing others to take advantage, and you're getting all mixed up in something, and you're just probably very suspicious and not a very good person, and so on. The paradigm has a moral agenda. It has I don't mean that it's moral, it has a specific agenda to berate people who are not doing what is considered necessary according to the paradigm. But of course, embracing the paradigm, the contemporary Western paradigm of identity, it does beg the question as to what is human nature. And my human nature is, of course, very, very different from the human nature that's presumed to exist on the basis of this paradigm of private property identity. So I can see I'm very negligent regarding my identity. I'm not defending it. I don't believe in it. I don't construct it. I believe in being. I think I exist whether or not I construct an identity. I think my existence is palpable and real enough and energized and salient enough. But whether it's real enough to a contemporary Western person, well, that's a different matter. And I'll leave you with those thoughts.